welcome to today's video. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays, so since it is, I kind of wanted to do some themed videos, and I'm actually really excited about it. So as you can see, I'm kind of all dolled up in my Thanksgiving costume. It's technically a Jamestown costume from when my family went to the 400th anniversary of Jamestown, which was in 2007. Well, this year happens to be the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims coming to America. Next year is the 400th anniversary of the actual Pilgrims Thanksgiving. There's someone at the door. Hold on just a sec. Hey girl!
Hi!
How's it going? Sorry, I'm filming a YouTube video, so you can tell I'm a little...
I love your outfit. It's so cute.
I actually have another one. Do you want to wear it?
I would love to. Let's do it.
Yeah, you can be in my video too. Excuse me, cat. Now I'm here filming with my friend Emily. She has joined me in costume bliss. I wanted to talk some about the history of Thanksgiving because I think a lot of people don't really know much about it.
Yeah.
I personally think the best way to learn about history is through source documents, like so things that are actually written at the time, not things that were written about the time. People in history are just like you and me.
It's easier to judge people in the past because you don't know what they were thinking and feeling, and even to think about the culture they lived in, like they had a different idea of what the world was like and what life was like, and that influenced everything they could do, like especially today when we have the internet and we can research anything, and it makes us imagine that they have all of these things and resources that they did not have. Like they had very limited, whatever they had, they worked for.
A lot of people who look back on history things, they are looking at it from our perspective, where we can see where those decisions and what they did led to, where they were people just like you and me, where they're just like trying to live right and trying to accomplish, you know, a peaceful life and trying to live right for God and stuff. And every day when I make decisions, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know how that's going to impact the next 500 years. I want to start talking about the history of actually an Indian boy named Tisquantum. Tisquantum was actually taken captive. So Thomas Hunt, who kidnapped Tisquantum, actually had worked with Captain John Smith in helping get some peaceful trade relations to benefit both the Indians and the British. But he had his own interests and knew that there was money to be made if he kidnapped Indians and took them to Spain to sell into slavery. By the grace of God, Tisquantum was actually rescued by a Christian monk who was very against slavery, and he actually rescued Tisquantum, and I'm pretty sure Tisquantum lived with the monks for a decent amount of time. Eventually, they ended up sending him to England in an effort to get him back home to the Americas. So he ended up living with a man named John Slaney, who worked for the Newfoundland Company that was trying to negotiate peaceful trade. Like they thought that because Britain already had so much that they'd created, and the Indians had a lot of things to offer, that they wanted to do some peaceful trading and thought it could be really beneficial to both the Indians and to the British. With Tisquantum here, Tisquantum. So with Tisquantum here, he was able to negotiate from living with John Slaney, who was part of the Newfoundland Company. He was actually the treasurer, that he could get on a ship, and basically to pay for his passage back home to America, he would just work for them for a while once he got to America as an interpreter to help create negotiations with the Indians. Once he worked for them long enough to basically pay for his voyage over there, then he could do whatever he wanted because he'd done his job. In 1619, Tisquantum left on Captain Thomas Dermer was the captain of the ship that he was on, and they went back to the Americas. And when they arrived, they realized that basically the Pawtuxet tribe had been wiped out by plague, and there was no one left. That Tisquantum's family, friends, everyone he knew from his entire tribe was completely gone.
I think that would be really heartbreaking to come back and to realize that it was all gone.
That's 1619, where we leave Tisquantum in the Americas with no tribe, but he joins up with Massasoit and his brother Quadaquino, I think was the brother's name.
That sounds right. Not
Not super familiar with the brother, honestly. But the two of them were in charge of the Wampanoag Confederation. So Tisquantum went and stayed with Massasoit, and we're leaving them there in 1619. Now to go back in time a little bit, back before Jamestown, before all of this, King Henry VIII, who I think most people are familiar with for having
with 6 wives.
Yes. When King Henry VIII wanted to divorce some of his wives instead of beheading them or however else he got rid of them, the church stood against divorce at the time.
He created his own church, basically because at the time the church was so powerful politically, so was the kingship, so he felt that that was competing with his rule. In many ways, I think the divorce issue was just an excuse because, yes, that helped him in his immediate issue, but then he had control of the church, and that helped him long term. And he's not going to let that go once he has that amount of powers.
Because basically, once King Henry VIII created the Church of England, if you stood against what that church thought, you were standing against what the king said.
Yes.
So basically, then you were guilty of treason. So now, fast forward, and we're in King James's time. The Pilgrims are this group of people that didn't agree with the way King James was running the Church of England, and they felt like the way that you were supposed to worship God is not the way that the king was dictating that it had to be done. They ended up leaving England and going to Holland because the Netherlands had a lot of religious freedom. In Holland, a lot of the Pilgrims were having trouble finding jobs, which obviously you can't live if you can't work, and then you can't eat and all of that. And also they felt like their children were being very negatively influenced, and they just weren't sure that they really wanted to stay. So they went back to England for a time. Several of them got arrested. They were in and out of prison all the time. It was a real problem, but they were able to negotiate and buy their way on to get passages on ships. So there were 2 ships, the Speedwell and the Mayflower. You may not have ever heard of the Speedwell because the Speedwell didn't actually make it to America. It actually left, I'm pretty sure, before the Mayflower.
Okay.
They made it not very far, realized this ship has all kinds of problems, so they ended up taking it back to England and were like, this is I want to say a 2-month journey across the Atlantic Ocean. That might not be right, so don't take that as word. But I think it was about a 2-month journey, and you were going to be out in the middle of nowhere with no way to call for help. Basically, when your ship's having problems, you decide, I don't think I want to take this ship across the ocean when I got no way to get off of it except for it to go in the ocean.
And I'm pretty sure there weren't lifeboats. This is not a lifeboat situation where you have a second plan. The ship was planned, the only plan.
They also were leaving, I'm pretty sure they set out in either September or October, somewhere in that neighborhood. So basically, they had to take enough supplies to try and get themselves through the winter on the ship as well as the people. So when the Speedwell didn't work out, and they ended up trying to cram everyone on the Mayflower. Some of the Pilgrims actually ended up getting left behind in England. A bunch of them crammed onto the Mayflower. They made it about halfway across the Atlantic, and everything's going pretty well. The weather's not too bad. A bunch of people were seasick, but you know, that's just how it is. About halfway through, the weather starts picking up. They end up in a bunch of storms. It blows them off course. They do not land where they were intending to land. Here's where our stories are going to connect. They actually land very close to where the Pawtuxet tribe was. God uses bad things for good. That's basically the message to get out of the entire story of Pilgrims, because they end up in this place that the land has been cleared. It's been ready for farming because obviously the Pawtuxets were living there. So they have places where their houses were and places where their fields were and stuff. So the Plymouth village ends up being very close to where the Pawtuxet were. They get there in late fall, early winter. Like, they don't have time to plant a garden or whatever. So they're trying to survive, and they're sleeping mainly on the boat. Some people were able to build homes to get off the boat because the boat was so overcrowded and they were all sick, and it was just a bad situation all around. So they actually didn't have any encounters with Indians that whole first winter, but because they were unable to provide food for themselves and they ended up having a lot of sickness and disease, I think over half of them died that winter.
A lot of people passed away. It was really, really hard. Massasoit
had actually been kind of watching them all winter long, and that spring he sent an Indian man named Samoset. Samoset had learned English from fishermen, I believe from Canada, but he learned English and could speak it, not as well as Tisquantum actually. He was also less attached to British people. Like, Tisquantum had lived amongst the British and realized there were so many good people, that even though he'd been kidnapped by a bad British man, that there were so many good people and had a lot of respect for them.
I just want to highlight, like, I think that's a really important part of talking about the Pilgrims, because it's easy to go too far either direction and see they were really bad people or really awesome people, but like we were talking about earlier, they were people and they had good and bad sides. Tisquantum's story really shows that, that there is so much variety even within these same groups of people who came over together, and they get separated by their actions, but not by their names or their nationality or even their time period in history or the ideas that their time accepted.
They wore different clothes than we did, and they were making different decisions we did based on their culture of the time. But people in history were exactly the same as people today. You kind of have to watch their actions and do your best to show love to them and figure out where their heart is actually leaning, because you can only judge a person from the outside so much.
Which is why you brought up original sources earlier, because if you have the original source, you get a more idea of what the person was thinking and where their heart was. And that even brings even more to the table of trying to understand what was going on. We forget that these people, their goal was to survive, number one. And a lot of people, like if you're in America today, most people, they don't have to survive at that same level. there's some help for them in some form, or they've been given a lot of opportunity to help themselves.
Samoset comes, just basically walks into their village, just prances right in and says, "Hi friends, how's it going?" And they're kind of blown away that this Indian man just walks in and starts talking to them in English. This leads to a really great relationship between the Wampanoag and the Pilgrims. They created a society in which they lived peacefully together and actually helped each other massively. The Pilgrims likely would have not survived if it hadn't been for those Indians who were willing to come alongside them and teach them how to live here. So soon after Samoset came in and introduced himself to them, Squantum, now called Squanto, actually moved in with the Pilgrims to teach them how to grow their own food, how to hunt, just all sorts of things to help them survive. With Squanto's help, they actually did fantastic. They thrived, and that fall, they wanted to have a big celebration. They invited the Indians over. You know where I'm going with this. So in the fall of 21, they celebrated the fact that they were going to survive and had made it. That the Indians were helping them and they had a great relationship with them and were so grateful. So they wanted to invite the Indians in to show their own gratitude to the Indians. And that God had kept them and given them this place where they could go to worship Him, and that He provided people to help along the way. I really think that you can look back and just see God's hand so much when you look back at their story. It's just so impacting. So they had a great celebration. I mean, the first Thanksgiving, if you look back, like, they're having games, they had shooting competitions and a massive feast and whatever, and they just had such a great time. But it wasn't anything like our Thanksgivings because they were literally thankful to be alive. I hope you enjoyed this video talking about the history of the Pilgrims. I don't know if that was any new information for you, or maybe it was all old information for you.
It's so interesting, and I think it really just gives a deeper appreciation for what we live through today. A lot of holidays in America become very commercialized, and it can just be kind of irritating to see all the new stuff that they come out with to sell you for the next holiday. But there is some really just deep value and meaning to this holiday, and I think it can give, I don't know, it makes me more grateful for the holiday itself, and also just to think back on comparing what I have with what they have and the sacrifices they made that led to where I am now.
If you want to check back next week or subscribe so you can see that video, I am going to do a video next week talking about some of the Thanksgiving traditions. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that little thumbs up button. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Bye!